It's me, Capri. My mommy is the best. Super mom will be best. She helps mommy get their smiles back, their giggles back, and their sparkle back. You wait for the show. Brush. Get ready for it's super slowly, but super strong.
Welcome back to my Global Healing for the Soul podcast, sponsored by myself, Robin Stoltman. As I am America's #1 fertility and parenting mindset expert, I'm a transformational resilience speaker, coach and trainer for businesses and individuals, as well as an author and a super mom of 11 biological children, soon to be 8 C-sections in a row, overcoming infertility using my fertility mindset program I created, with this being season number 6, episode number 25, where every week I feature different guests to empower you to become the best version of yourself through different methods you may not have heard of or even thought of. So be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and keep coming back to Healing for the Soul podcast. Today I have my guest, Dr. Greg Linkowski. He is
close.
You pronounce it for me, please.
Linkowski.
Linkowski. Thank you. I appreciate it. He is a medical doctor. He is a retired diagnostic radiologist with over 20 years of experience serving patients. Since retiring in 2014, Greg has been exploring life coaching and recently published his first book, Dare to Thrive. A project 30 years in the making, Dare to Thrive shares his journey as a trauma survivor and offers reflections on healing, lessons learned, and spiritual growth. Through his writing and coaching, he aims to encourage others on their own paths to recovery and remind them they are not alone. Thank you so much, Greg, for being here with our audience.
Thank you so much, Robin, for having me. And I already know, in just doing a little bit of background research on you, that we have a common mentor, namely Mr. John Maxwell. And
Yes.
I just said, this is going to be a divine appointment, because I've read at least a few of his books, listened to some of his audio tapes when they were back on cassette years ago. And plus I listened to your first podcast, your comeback session, and we have plenty to talk about.
Awesome. I'm very excited because it isn't too often that I've had any guests really go do that much research on me, and I greatly appreciate that because I research all the guests beforehand too. And so I appreciate this because as soon as your profile came up, I'm like, I want to meet him because it sounds like the childhood trauma really had an impact on shaping your identity and how it affected you, especially being a trauma survivor. And just everything that you were talking about, especially with that book that you wrote for Dare to Thrive, 30 years in the making. That is amazing. And at the same time, that shows how much dedicated you are to what it is that you're working on doing, even for yourself.
Thank you so much, Robin. And I have to say, it wasn't my personal choice to experience some of the traumatic events that I did as a child, nor was it my choice, but God's choice to let us have a child back in 1993 who had severely medically challenged. One could say severely disabled. And we walked through that with major help from God, and also lived through our son David's passing. So I feel like I've lived 2 lifetimes in one. And also being a doctor was both a blessing, and sometimes it was not so much a blessing. But I would like to just share I guess I could call it a sentinel event that happened when I was probably 13 or 14. My parents, back in New York, I grew up in a town called Yonkers. I was born in 54, so I grew up in essentially the late 50s, 60s. It was an interesting time. My dad, bless his heart, was a World War II Navy veteran who experienced the bloodbath and the fighting at D-Day in Normandy, and experienced a number of things, which I was to find out way later in his life. And I even researched the LST that he was on, which is landing ships and tanks. So I know, at least from a research point of view, that my dad really did experience this. Well, I'm positive he had very bad, untreated PTSD. And unfortunately, as many men and women did back then, resorted to alcohol to numb his pain. And my parents' marriage was unfortunately very much not the kind of marriage that I and my wife wound up modeling for our children. In fact, I call us generational change agents because that's what we've worked on. And now it's up to my kids. They have the ball's in their court now. But anyway, one morning, Dad was very drunk. And this was when one Saturday morning, probably around 11 or 12 in the morning, Dad brandished a loaded .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol in the kitchen. He shot it into the floor of the kitchen and announced, "I'm going upstairs to kill myself." You can imagine. Well, put it this way, I wouldn't want anybody to imagine the terror. It was 10 out of 10. We were frozen. We were speechless. I couldn't even move. And Dad staggered past me. We had a 2-story home. He was struggling to get up the stairs, and 4 of us instinctively charged him on the stairs. I was successful in wresting the loaded .45 caliber gun from his right hand, and a precious life was saved. The police came at my mother's request, and they were very kind to Dad. I remember that distinctly. And they did take him down to the station. I mean, back then, going on a psychiatric ward of 5150 wasn't even, I don't even know if it was invented yet. That was probably back in 67. But anyways, he spent the weekend at my maternal grandmother's house, came back the following Monday, and he appeared contrite, didn't really talk about it, which was very curious. And he abstained from drinking, I think, for a couple of weeks, and then the cycle slowly began, and we went on with life. It was one of those elephants that was swept under the carpet, which there's no way to hide. But that's what we did. And life was very chaotic, very unsafe. And for all of us. somehow, and I'm not even quite sure why, I, in many ways, became the symbol of health for my family. I I was raised as a devout Catholic. Went to Catholic grade school, high school, and even college. I was an altar boy, and I excelled in school, which really was my way of getting recognition. Well, I got a hold of this book when I was sometime in my teen years by a fellow named Dr. David Viscott called The Making of a Psychiatrist. And I said, like, I almost got a download from God and saying, this is what I want to become. And so I applied myself diligently, got accepted into medical school, and that was my passion until the third year of medical school, when I was assigned on my clinical clerkship to a locked ward in New York. And the patients were very ill, a lot of psychiatric, substance abuse, you name it. The patients had it. Well, one weekend, a patient committed suicide on the locked ward. And when I came in to do my student clerkship, I was devastated. I realized there's no way I can do this. And so I rotated through different subspecialties. I went through medicine, I went through pediatrics, surgery, excluding them one by one, until one day I discovered radiology, and a very dynamic professor gave us a lecture on radiology and its usefulness in helping people. And a light bulb went on. I said, that's for me. And I have to tell you, Robin, it was a match. I couldn't have matched better, because my perfectionism that I had grown up with, and I would say probably hyper attention to detail, worked splendidly. And so I used that to excel as a diagnostic radiologist. And so that's kind of my career in a nutshell. And I loved it until I was able to retire at age 60. And for a variety of reasons, I was able to exit. And I'm very grateful to be in this chapter of life right now.
No, I love that they were able to take what has happened, that basically, how I say it is, Satan meant for evil. You've turned everything into good by the grace of God. And I love that in your story. And then you were able to pivot and quickly find that, like, the psych ward was not for you. And you were able to find that radiology really played into your strengths, which is amazing, because you are right. You need to be able to have that strength in radiology to know, like, if a person's got a fracture, or, I don't know all of that a radiologist does. I just know that they are very important in medical. Like, we need them. That's
yeah.
something I do know, and they have to be very detailed in reading the reports. You don't want to get it wrong.
And one thing I've learned is along the way is, now I have a passion for physicians, healthcare professionals, nurses, different therapists. I've learned along the way, not everything that's even said by a healthcare professional or written, even in a formal report, is always 100% accurate. I maintain the right to overread even imaging studies that I have had, and even family members have had. Although I do not do that on a regular basis. But I've been around. Not You have to advocate. You have to be an advocate, and that kind of, in a sense, segues into David's life, which and I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but I think another really where going from where I was to where I am now, I wound up getting married to my current and only wife, Lynn, back in '83. We have lived through most things that there are that a married couple can live through. And what I love about my wife is she is also from New York. She doesn't give up. I don't give up. And even though there have been times when either or both of us were quite ready, we didn't. God saw fit to keep us together. And so we moved from San Francisco after I finished additional fellowship training in '87. We moved to Fresno, and I got a job working at a high-power community hospital, which was not a good fit. But being who I am, and I don't give up. I applied myself. I did my very best. The pace and pitch and work expectations essentially exceeded what I could do. And I became aware of it. The group became aware of it. And I became aware that I was struggling emotionally, spiritually, and probably even physically. And I found a really good therapist who I actually saw the same therapist for approximately 3 decades. The fruit of that was I became the kind of husband and father that I really wanted my wife and children to have. And I hadn't, when you don't have the training, how do you do it?
It's impossible.
It's very impossible. I mean, you could watch TV shows and about, how, Father Knows Best or this or that, all the shows, and pick up little tips. But my therapist helped me grow and also deal with some challenges that were at work. Being a doctor it's not the same today as it was back in the late 80s and early 90s. I will tell you that medicine has changed dramatically, in my opinion. Some of it not so much for the better, but I wound up going to the organization that I had my almost 24 years with, and I was so grateful that I was able to use my creative talents to build up ultrasound, to CAT scanning. I helped develop, and I even started our MRI program, which is magnetic resonance imaging program. anyway, that was in the early days. And then hospital opened and things became progressively more complex, technical. Um, and, with technology expanding, it was quite a ride. Well, my wife and I had our first child in 1990. Beautiful little girl that I was so in love with and still am. And, I was on top of the world. Well, we had a second child in January 1st of 1993, named David. At about 3.5 months of age, we found out David was severely disabled and had probably 10 out of 10 severe developmental delay. Unknown to us before that, but it became apparent when he wouldn't make eye contact. A couple of months later, seizures started, and it was horrific. And part of the reason, actually, why I wrote this book, Dare to Thrive, probably the main reason was going through life with David. That tested our faith, our marriage, our whole family. You want to talk about going through it, the valley. We lived it.
Yeah, and it's difficult.
It was, people say God will never give you more than you can handle.
That's a lie.
And so
I figured that out.
My rationalization is God must love me an awful lot.
Same here.
But anyway, we met some incredible people along the way. One of whom, Pastor Doug, wrote the foreword to my book, and we've been doing life with him for 30 years. I started journaling and writing our story, I want to say 30 years ago for sure. That could have been 31 years ago. But I didn't, I knew I had to share that. But life, raising other children, this, that, things came in the way. As did alcohol into my life intermittently. In fact, I do want to leave this because I know we do not have a lot of time, but one of the main things I have done over the last probably 5 years, and it's been a work in progress for me, is I have used a few different methods, but I am nearly alcohol free, or I say predominantly alcohol free. That singular change has helped me be the best me I can be. I kind of call it like Greg 2.0. So if I leave anything, giving up, abstaining, or at the very least cutting back on alcohol consumption, what a terrible toxin alcohol is. And I also, we also became affiliated with an amazing organization. Actually, they're centered in California, called Johnny and Friends. Johnny Erickson Tata is a quadriplegic as a result of a diving accident when she was a teenager in the Chesapeake Bay. She's been alive for the last 58 years, I believe. She has an incredible ministry called Johnny and Friends. And I would urge readers, particularly those who are going through it, like with a child or a member of the family that has some type of challenge, autism, this, that. I mean, there's so much pain out there, Rob, and it's absolutely amazing. But through it all, we all have an extra dose of empathy and compassion. And in my remaining years, I wish to bring a message of hope and encouragement to those going through it, and exhort them, if you don't have a faith walk, get a faith walk.
Most definitely. It's needed.
And a mentor or mentors that have been there, done that.
Yeah.
And I want to leave a legacy of love, and I also want to leave a legacy of forgiveness, which, by the way, over the 30 years that when I was in therapy, boy, did I have to go through the forgiveness route with both mom and dad. And to the extent that when each of my parents passed on, I had shed all the tears already. And I look forward, actually, I don't want to sound morbid, but I look forward to joining them in heaven, as well as my son David, who went on to glory in 2002 at the age of almost 10.
That's hard.
That's me.
Well, no, I appreciate it because I know it's hard. Like, I know child loss, from what I understand, because I've only had miscarriages.
Right.
But what I understand is that it still changes in the brain. Like, you can see it, like, in scans, is what I've been told. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's like child loss, it's one of those things that some people try to minimize it because they've never gone through it. But me, I'm like, the age doesn't matter. The brain still cannot handle child loss. And it's difficult. But I'm not trying to minimize your loss at all, like I said, because I know child loss is child loss. It's not normal to go through. It's just not.
No. And I've told my other two children, nobody else can die before I do. And yeah, and the other thing that we've gone through, and this does bear mentioning, we Lynn and I adventurously had a third child, and who is living and thriving. Sammy happens to be gay,
Mm-hmm.
and an entertainer, but just going through that growth process for me was really important, because I grew up conservative Catholic, gay, no good, no bueno. And I'm coming from a place where I had one son who passed on.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in my DNA to turn my back on my son. So I have come to a place of being more affirming and realizing that the God I serve is a God of love. And as far as judgments go, leave it to the great physician.
It's true. I like when you said about for the great physician part, because there's people that it's I've heard it said before, so I know the quote is not right, but man fixes another one or something like that. Like, the doctors get the credit for the work that God does.
Yeah.
And I know that it's a phrase. I've heard it before, and I know that I'm not getting it right.
Yeah. But paraphrasing that, God works through whichever method or modality he chooses for his honor and glory.
Yes, that's true.
And so, anyways,
Yeah.
the bottom line for me is I am living life. I am in my, second half, I guess you could say, and very grateful to be here.
Well, I'm glad that you were on our show today as well, and also grateful that you're here too, to be able to share this story with us, especially their book, Dare to Thrive. Where can people find your book?
There's a variety of places, but for sure, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, it might even be on some place called Goodreads, but it's Kindle. It would bless me, if we're still being recorded. Okay. It would bless me incredibly if I did turn a profit, which haven't yet, but hey, that's the way it goes. I didn't write it to become another millionaire. I wrote it because it was my mission, and I hope part of my developing ministry.
I love that because you have a bigger mission behind your book, and
Yes,
that
ma'am.
helps. Yes. And so, before we close the show completely out today, what's the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
Best way, I can give you my Gmail, which is a lowercase LINKOWSKI, Greg, at gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook and also on Instagram. Instagram is the Greg Linkowski _M.D.
Awesome. So I want to encourage everybody who's watching the show to be sure to share Healing for the Soul podcast with everyone you know. And I encourage you to follow me, Robin Stoltman, on social media, as well as my guest, Dr. Greg
Closer.
Yes, I'm getting closer.
Linkowski.
Linkowski as well. And thank you for your time and your energy while listening to today's episode of Healing for the Soul podcast.
Bye.